Hello, everyone. Welcome to our studio. Today, I'm joined by a great person. He is a senior software engineer, Java champion, Oracle Ace Java Pro, Java Magazine editor, and so much more. Please welcome Elias Nogueira.
Hey,
Yay!
woo, hey, thank you.
Hey. Right. Elias, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, and I'm in a really good mood. For those who doesn't know, I live in the Netherlands, and normally it's like the 6 months of winter and no
Mhm.
sun. Today is a sunny day, and it's warm day. It's like 24 degrees, which is a lot for the Netherlands. So yeah, it's awesome here.
Oh God, I envy you so much because I am, like a very gentle flower, and I need warmth and sunshine. But I live in a place where it's cold.
Oh.
Yeah, most of the time. But well, summers in Kazakhstan are quite hot, but well, winter is a bit longer than I would be happy to have. All right. Elias, what are you going to tell us today? And friends, if you have any questions, absolutely any questions, feel free to post them in the comments, and we will be happy to answer them. I sure have lots of questions for Elias because this topic is really exciting for me. API testing. Wow. Well, but first, Elias, how did you actually get into testing? Because I see that you publish a lot of articles on testing and do the conference talks. So why this topic exactly? Why this expert field?
Well, long story short, I was working in a company back in the days in Brazil, early 20, yeah, and I was a backend developer at that time. And the team were using extreme programming practices. And then we know that like the TDD and CI/CD and all the testing stuff for developers got a lot of attention with that practice from XP. And then I was doing a lot of testing as well. So it's not only like back in the days, just develop something, try to run locally, and that's it. But they're still doing it nowadays. I don't know why, but we were doing a lot of unit and kind of integration tests, and then like testing it before we could release, and trying to run this in a pipeline. Uh, and then I got more interest in testing, in how we can test different things. And then I started testing more and more and more. At some point, I was doing more testing than code, which you can do if you're developing even code. You can do even more tests than code. We know that, right? We do, I don't know, we create an endpoint for a microservice, super simple. But when you
Mhm.
start testing, it's a lot, but it's a lot of more code than
Yeah,
the code itself. And then I just like it was a normal thing switching to be a quality engineer instead of the backend developer, but all the time focusing on backend. So I
mhm,
know I work with a lot of stuff that's front end. I don't like that
mhm,
much, but like my whole career now as a quality software engineer focusing on quality, it's all in backend development.
mhm. Right. So, well, API tests for those who are new to the topic. API tests are the same as unit tests, or this is something more specific or something completely different.
Uh, it's different. Like we can say that unit test is the base of everything, regardless if you're doing microservice testing through APIs or any other practice or any other kind of application, like even web and mobile, they do have as well unit tests. It's a little bit different, and there's a lot of nowadays. There's a lot of different opinions about what is a unit test and what should be integration test that we do through the APIs. Uh, the before we had this whole microservices stuff and like more modern practices and tools, we are saying basically that unit test covers basically everything that we are developing. That's 100% true nowadays. But nowadays, for at least what I believe and what I say to others, unit testing, it's basically what we can test in a small units. And normally it's kind of requirements, rules we do have in our application that doesn't require it like open up a full context of Spring, for example, or open up the full web app or a full mobile app. We can do that unit testing, testing that small pieces of code that we can really like do it faster. And then in API tests, like for microservices, for it's kind of integration tests, we do need a context. We do need kind of like partially the application, the full application to run those tests. So it's another category. So we can exercise fully the application or smaller pieces of the application there. So
Mm-hmm.
there's these two different ways of working for unit and integration tests.
I see. What kind of tools do we need to perform API testing?
Cool. So we're talking about Java here, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
And to do API tests, we do have like, let's talk about the two main frameworks we have for Java, Quarkus and Spring.
Mm-hmm.
Those two are awesome. Uh, we can use whatever we want. Of course, we have our preferences, but they, as they are great frameworks, they come with some tools as well to testing, and it's super nice because if you see in another like nowadays for modern development, it's common that when we have a framework doing some stuff, they also add the tool for that, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that common before. But like since the beginning of Spring, we had Spring Test, and we can use Spring Test to test anything related to the APIs. And for Quarkus, we do have a super nice thing. What Quarkus did, and it's not my research, but what I observed from Quarkus, uh, instead of developing a new tool and call it, I don't know, Quarkus test, something like this, they are using an open source framework to do the test, which called it Rest Assured, which is
Mm-hmm.
a super nice framework. We can use it standalone. We can use even in Spring if you want to. And they, of course, they modified. They added new capabilities for Quarkus, but like behind the scenes, they are using Rest Assured there. It's a super nice tool. And those are basically the two tools that are super famous and nice to use for integration tests and API tests in this way.
Mm-hmm. So, do I understand it correctly that with Quarkus, it's easier to do API testing due to Rest Assured than with Spring Boot?
My personal opinion, yes. But it really depends what we want. Like what I this is actually my personal opinion. Where in Spring we need to use REST template to create
Mm-hmm.
all the requests and manipulate and doing all the stuff. And it's fine. We can do whatever we want. It's a great tool, but it's a little bit repetitive. And I would say it's not the correct word, but it's too technical in some
Mm-hmm.
sense. Where with Rest Assured, it's a little bit more flexible, understandable, and it's saying what you actually want to do. It's a little bit more extensible as well. For example, Rest Assured, basically, I tend to believe that everyone that develops microservice, they can create the OpenAPI specification for the endpoints before as an YAML file instead of adding the annotations for Swagger or something like this. So if we do have the OpenAPI spec, as a lot of people are doing, we can get this OpenAPI spec and generate the clients to
Mm-hmm.
hit that endpoints, right? We do this for Spring, we do this for mobile, we do this for web, we do this for all the things that will consume the microservices. And the OpenAPI generator, the tool that creates this, they have support for Rest Assured, for example. So they can generate all the clients that will hit an endpoint, but instead of using it as like production, we create it for testing purpose to accelerate the test creation and creating a better architecture for that. And we actually quickly Google it, but they don't have this for Spring Boot. They do have
Mm-hmm.
for Assured. Not saying that Spring Boot test is not a good tool. It's awesome tool, but like what I do, I tend to compare and see for me what is the most beneficial to use. So for example, I really like rest assured to do any kind of API test, regardless if Quarkus or Spring.
Mm-hmm. I see. In the title of our discussion, we said that API tests are a safety net for the microservices. Why is it so?
Uh, One, because like there is it will be really hard to not doing API tests or integration tests, let's say API tests for microservices, because we do need to test. We can mock two things. One, we should do, and the normal thing we do as developers, we mock everything, right? Everything that is not our endpoint we are developing, that we will open a context and we have a database and we hit there, we start mocking it. And this is perfect for this solution. We can talk about how we can extend this later. Maybe I'm just saying it like now, but it's a must, because if I don't do API tests through integrations, I'm basically not testing the application. So I'm just like verifying something, but I don't have that coverage and getting all the possible scenarios, or at least the scenarios I should have for the API that Basic wants to do. We do.
I see. Well, that's exciting. Well, microservices testing microservices is a well for me that's a super complicated thing in any way. So
It is, but it's not as well.
right.
Uh, it is complicated if you need to get a really good coverage on it.
Mm-hmm.
Then everything is complicated when we want to extend the coverage. But actually, the tools nowadays make it easier. Just a second. Say hi.
Oh, hello! What a beauty! Is it a boy or a girl?
It's a girl, it's Felicia.
Felicia. It's so
Mm.
cute. Oh, she said hello.
Hello. It's easy. The tools
Mhm,
make it easier, like Spring Boot test using REST template, or all the features make it easier. Rest assured make it easier, but extending the coverage, doing different things, it's make it not harder, but like a little bit more time consuming. For example, as developers, what we tend to do when we create tests, let's say for microservices right now,
mhm,
we do the happy path that we call. So we want I want to create a resource. I don't know, I have a contact, I need to create a contact. So this is the first test we do. It's perfect. But then if I have a lot of restrictions or rules there, okay, I can create a contact, but the account number for a contact that I will make a transfer should be only valid for a European market, so IBAN. It cannot
mhm,
be another one if the country of the contact is a European one. So as soon as I have those requirements, I'm starting extending with a lot of more tests, and it's making not more difficult, but just more time consuming.
mhm. Right. So, there was a question that I wanted to ask. Gosh, um, God, I was so caught up in your explanation that I forgot my question.
No, it's fine.
Right. Well, about the happy paths. So, ideally, we should test each restriction that we have, each possible scenario. So,
Yeah,
in a perfect world, we should get like 100% code coverage, right?
yeah. But sometimes, yeah, with integration tests, we can still measure the coverage. But like 100% coverage, sometimes kind of fake. Not fake in the terms of it's fake in the number. For
Mm-hmm.
example, if I have a rule and I exercise that rule in only one path, I'm getting a like classic example. There is a testing technique. If you have like kind of like a voting system in most of the countries, you can, at least in Brazil, we can vote if you are 18 years old. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not 18 years old, you cannot vote. So if you're doing a test for that, what we would do as normal developers, happy path, 18 years old and 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We won't think about all the other requirements. And what we actually need to do to really get a good coverage, we need to test the number itself, 18, minus 1 plus 1.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because as developers, when we verify it, we do greater than or greater than equal than or less than equal or less. We do this verification, right? It's no, in
Right.
all
Yeah.
the program languages. And I can make a mistake on this. Instead of uh, greater or equal to 18, I can make a huge mistake in adding greater than 18. So 18 won't be there, and it's a false positive because 18 should be there. So
Yeah.
there's some techniques that can extend the coverage, that can show that your code is bulletproof or it's not working correctly. But we, like, if I do the test for this that pass this check and it
Mm-hmm.
pass, I get the 100% of coverage, but I should have at least more two tests. But
Mm-hmm.
those two tests won't get 101% of the coverage. It's
Exactly.
still in
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So by these techniques, do you mean mutation testing? Because I know that's.
Mutation is a little bit different. This is the boundary analysis. Mutation test is super nice, and I highly advise to use mutation test. What it do? It does exactly the example I'm doing. Like mutation test will mutate the code and see if your tests are still passing or actually getting the exceptions or getting the wrong results by just mutating your code. The classical mutations they do have, if you're using an equals to compare some elements or some object or anything, and it's mutating to not equals, just to show to you if you have covered that scenario, that possibility. And we start mutating all the different things, objects, any kind of expressions. There's a full things of what they can mutate. So basically mutation test is it's good when we don't know that much about testing techniques at the beginning. So
Mm-hmm.
it will show a lot of like these kind of issues. And it's good as well if we have some kind of complex systems and things that we cannot easily see or
Mm-hmm.
easily try to follow. So the mutation tools can like really help on this because it's faster than we starting doing a debug and analyzing just to understand something.
Oh yeah. You can see that testing is like art. It's I know it's more complicated than it just seems because when you start programming as a junior, your task is just to write some tests to verify that your code works correctly. But then it gets more and more complicated, and that you have to check all the scenarios.
Yeah.
Um, right, Pasha. Hello, Pasha.
Hey, Pasha.
Has a question for you. Elias, so which tools for API testing do you prefer? Postman, Herald, Insomnia, IntelliJ built-in clients, or anything else?
None of them. I will explain why. I prefer doing this for true code, like using Spring Boot test or using Rest Assured or the built-in Rest Assured on Quarkus or any other tool you can, like in any programming language, you can write code. Those tools like Postman, Insomnia, IntelliJ, HTTP client, it's not code. And then it's easier to create all the kind of tests. For example, Postman is super well known in the market. So there's a user interface. You paste your URL, you set the parameters, you set the request body, and you can see you can make some assertions. It's perfect if you have few endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have your application is growing, you have more endpoints and more requirements and more rules. The maintenance of it is a little bit more difficult. So my personal take, Postman is a great tool when we need to do small checks or using small projects. When a bigger project, I prefer to do everything through code because it's easier to maintain, it's easier to create all the different patterns to accelerate its adoption,
Mm-hmm.
to speed up the execution, doing all the other stuff.
Okay, and how about mock MVC?
Mock MVC, yeah, it's perfect. Like we use through mock. So normally using combination, right, with the Spring Boot test. So we'd say, hey, mock MVC, I need to mock this endpoint. And when this endpoint is, I don't know, send a payment with this ID, then I should have this return. It's a great tool, and it's a must-use tool when we are doing these Spring tests for APIs.
Mm-hmm.
Her didn't know Pasha, so it's totally called cool. Have you Googled this tool? Because I didn't know this tool. Oh,
Okay.
cool.
So yeah, Harold, that's new for me too, actually.
It's look like the same approach that IntelliJ built-in client is doing, right?
I guess. Um,
Looks like.
yeah. Right. So, Elias, maybe you could show us some examples, so some coding examples. So, how do people start with API testing?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Do you want me share the screen, show some project? I will do some
Yeah.
kind of like I will show my projects,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
easy projects that I have on GitHub. Just a
Mm-hmm.
moment. GitHub. There is one that I'm using in the current talks. It's payment system, and let me open. Let me present. And thankfully, it won't tell me to restart my Chrome
Oh,
to share the screen. Oh, yeah.
hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Cool.
So, I have a project on GitHub, payment system. I can share in the
Yeah, please do.
channel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to connect. Maybe I will send to you and you can send there in the
Yeah. Yes,
comments.
exactly.
This YouTube ones.
Will do. Mm-hmm.
So I have an application, simple payments system application, let's say, and I have like classic Spring Boot project having a controller and a service and an integration, like just to show the code first, so you
Mm-hmm.
guys can understand everything. And super simple. Any kind of tutorial for Spring Boot, you see a structure like this. You have your
Yeah.
controllers, you have your models, your repository, your services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then basically in our controller, you have like the REST application doing the requests. And if you need to have some rules there, some checks, you put it in a service and you have models to model the request and the response. Super classic things in Spring Boot applications and even Quarks
Yeah.
applications or any kind of REST applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then to test it, I do have as well all the types of testing.
Mm-hmm.
For controller and for service, I will call that this is kind of unit testing, because for controller and service, I don't need to have the full context of Spring. I just need to have an integration when I need to really connect to the endpoint. So, for example, for the controller part, I have a super. Let me see if this is the correct. Let me do one change. Test containers final. Wait, let me see if the test is different. Yeah, this test is more. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's more assertive.
Uh-huh.
So what I have here, I have things like, okay, I should successfully create a payment request. So I have the data for the payment request that I use. I have my payments, and here, like I'm injecting mocks. So I'm using Mockito instead of mock MVC. And I'm
Uh-huh.
saying here, hey, when payment serves request, the create payment, I could set, of course, I'm not setting here, I could set the payments when it's kind of any, then return the payments that I have. In my response, you get the payment request and return it, but I'm shaping any request with payment will return this payment request, and then I just doing normal assertions. For API tests, guys, the most important assertions to do in the stats code first. Because if the stats code is not correct, in this case it's not 200, it's HTTP OK, I should stop the execution. All those assertions will be meaningless because stats codes are very wrong, so you don't need to do all the other assertions. And then it's a common thing, assert that response body is not null. And then if you see here, assert all, I'm using a feature from JUnit that is a soft testing. We have like hard assertions and soft assertions. This one we'll do in the way, okay, I will assert equals if the response has a unique ID, and it's this one, and if the amount is that one. Super simple. But you can see here, I'm calling this unit test from my perspective. I don't have any context and can run this. It's even though it's mocked, I have some injections. It's not fully unit test by the book from all the literature we do have, but this is a kind of more easy test that we don't have. We are mocking the dependencies. This is an example for the controller. Oops. So there is one for the service. For the service, I'm also using Mockito and injecting the mocks. But if you see here, I'm trying to a different approach. Instead of using the endpoint itself for the microservices, I'm using the service to create everything. So I'm using directly the service to interact with everything that I need. There is no request here, right? So I'm using directly the repository. So when I save this payment class, then it should return a payment, and then payment service should be able to create a request. I'm like completely ignoring my controller. And there will be another type of testing, which I call in here integration, where there is no mocks. There are no mocks.
Test containers. I see test containers.
And I have test containers because I'm running using a built-in database. And what I do here, exactly like here, I'm doing going to the repository and save. Going to my repository and save as well to find the different ones. This is another approach, but this one, I'm not using any mocks or anything. I'm with the full context of my application. But here I'm using the I'm using my my repository here. What I could do instead, I could use and do everything through the endpoints, and I'll show a different example in a different project. So I have another one that goes to my GitHub, and the repo will be the credit API, but I just need to credit API, this one, which is another Spring Boot classic application. But when I do have the tests, if we see how it's using, and by the way, this is a Spring Boot application. I have Spring Boot test to open the context from Spring to have it opened, but then I'm not using Spring test. I'm using Rest Assured. Just to explain a little bit. So what I'm doing, I'm creating through a factory pattern a data for this simulation. Then I'm saying, hey, given I know that the endpoint will I have a path parameter, which is called a CPF. Then I will have the data from the data generator. When I hit this endpoint, simulations, auto-injecting this CPF, which is the same as here with this data, then my stats code should be HTTP 200, okay. And then the response body should have name attributes with this specific name that I got from the factory, this CPF attribute with that, the mail with that, and so on. And then if you see, I'm using like now the endpoints because I have the context open. I can hit the endpoint and then I can do all the checks. And I'm doing all the assertions here. So those are basically the difference we can do in application, like a few integration, not few integration tests, but all the kinds of tests we can do in a microservice application. But there are different approaches to do that, and all the approaches are correct, and I think all the approaches should be done. So I have the approach of testing the controller. I have the approach testing the service. I have the approach testing the controller, but without mocks, which is with the full app running, which for me, it's called integration.
So basically, we have, for instance, two microservices, microservice one and microservice two, and then to test microservice two, that depends on microservice one, you spin up microservice one somehow, right, in the testing environment. Well, it should be running, and then you hit it with a test from microservice two, right? Or not?
Yes and no. It's another approach as well. The common approach, if I'm depending in the microservice, if I am microservice A and I need to
Mhm.
interact as well with microservice B, the
Uh-huh.
easiest and the first thing we do in the controller, we mock it, right?
Yeah.
The same way. What is not clickable? Let me put it. Yeah. So in the controller, we can just like do as the mock MVC, but we can just say, hey, when I do a request for something that I don't have, or for some URL that I know, then reply like this. So I'm mocking my external dependency. And this is one of the first tests we should do, of course, because we have a dependency. We don't have this dependency here. We do this thing as isolated microservices. When I need to really interact with microservice B, and I do need integration service for that, then there are different approaches. I can tell at least two approaches. One, if we do have the Docker image for that microservice from another team or for our team, but in a different project, and just open that Docker image, and then I can hit that endpoint, and then I can do the test from my projects to that endpoint. But I need
Mm-hmm.
to manage somehow, okay, when I starting my test, I need to open a Docker container, starting a Docker container, then I can run the test.
Mm-hmm. I
Another
have,
approach,
yeah.
another approach we can use, but I can tell a little bit more later, is through
Yeah.
ephemeral environments, but it's a different approach.
But I have another question. So, how do we actually check the situations that may happen in the real life? So for instance, we have two microservices. They are connected via the network, and there might be some issues with the network, right? So connection is lost or something like that. How do we test that?
Cool. Yeah. When we deal with microservice testing, we have like in this integration or this kind of testing, we have different levels. I would say the first one will be something called sanity check or smoke test. We just want to make sure that the endpoint for this simulation is up, right? I
Mm-hmm.
won't send any request. I just want to say to understand, is it up or down? We can do this through tests, or we can do this through the monitoring tools. So any kind of like Datadog or any kind of tool, we can just create like alerts or alarms and see if it's up. Or we can do through tests. But let's say we do through test. The first test I will do, hit the endpoint and just see if it's returning something that is not HTTP 500, like internal server error.
Yeah.
Then I can have my normal integration tests.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I have an endpoint. I know everything about the endpoint, and I can do. But in between this Senate and between the integration, I can have contract testing. If it's a external dependence that I don't control, I will send a request, and I won't validate the data as I'm doing here. For example, see if the name is exact that name, if the CPF or email is exact that one. I will just understand it's the all the response body. It's meeting my criterias. It has the name here, and the name is a string. It has an amount. The amount is an integer, for example. It has insurance. Insurance is a boolean. So I'm just checking, okay, everything from the response body is expected. Then I can have the certainty that I can use and assert the data there. A lot of people do this contract testing, because when we don't control the endpoint, and if it's not internal, we can have like super easy access, and we know that this external entity can change it easily. We want to make sure that if there's any change, I know in advance before running all the tests, because sometimes the test can take like few minutes, like
Yeah.
1-2 minutes. Sometimes the tests can take like 10 minutes. but I don't want to spend 10 minutes to understand that they did a change or they introduced a new field in the response body, remove it, some fields from the response body.
Mm-hmm.
Then
So
we can have the last approach. We have the integration, right? That is the self-contained for this simulation. For example, it's only one endpoint, but I can have the same way we do for front-end or user perspective. I can have an end-to-end test. So even through APIs, if I have all the endpoints up and running through Docker containers, for example, I can simulate everything that the user will do, but through the APIs. And
mm-hmm.
it's faster and reliable compared to the front-end testing for web and mobile.
Mm-hmm. So does it mean that we should also, and that we can also test the exceptions that the application must throw? So, for instance, not found exception, that we test that it throws
For
it.
sure. Let me share back my screen. For example, we are seeing the tests here. There are more, we call it functional testing. We test that the application is functioning as I want to, right? I'm getting a simulation here, and I want to understand that I'm getting one simulation because I'm sending the path. I want to get all simulations, and all simulations should be there. Then, simulation by name not found. I want to send a no existing name, and then I should test it's not found, because we do this in OpenAPI spec, right? We do all those things, it's not found. Or if I get, let me scroll down a little bit, if I get unprocessable entity, so I'm sending something that is not valid, or it's missing that should be required, I should
Mm-hmm.
do all these negative scenarios. In this perspective of this test and microservices, I'm testing basically what my API spec is showing to me, like the HTTP 200 is okay, and all the different HTTPs which will return those like differences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alpar has a question. So, could you please share your opinion about architectural unit testing? So, we don't care about naming files and class names. Arch unit is one example. Is there
Yeah,
any?
I have an Arch unit testing here in this payment system.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for me, it's a must. Why it's a
Mm-hmm.
must?
Yeah.
You of course it's an option to use it, but my current context, and you guys will understand that, I work for 18 teams, so it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a,
Can
and
imagine.
we have patterns even for naming conventions where I should see my controller, where I should see this and that, and all the things we do. And unfortunately, not all the people sometimes follow those approaches. But
Mm-hmm.
to keep consistency across different projects, we should have a way to make this consistency consistent. Why is that? My main take is that if Kat, you are working team A today, and in 3 months we are going to the same department but the team X, the way of working should be the same. When you see the project, you should be familiar with the structure, right? Because we are doing the same stuff.
Definitely.
And one of the ways or methods to ensure that everything is still like in the same architecture and following the definition of the architecture is through Arch unit tests, for example. And they do have simple things we can do. I have super silly things here, for example. Yeah. So controller should be named properly. So when I have the controller package, every class there should ending with, I hate GitHub in this way, should end with controller and repository and services. And I can do all the other checks. I can do even layered architecture and say, hey, controller repository or controller layer shouldn't be accessed by anyone,
Yeah.
because there is no meaning for us to accessing the controller in any of the code, right? Because it's the controller by definition. I
Yeah.
have my endpoints there, so
Yeah.
I can have this test. Those are silly tests, but we can basically define how we still keep the architecture clean and be followed through tests. If it's fail, it fails, it breaks the pipeline, we cannot merge, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Elias, I have another question. How about chaos engineering? So I know there are tools like chaos monkeys, as far as I remember, that can like bring chaos into the testing environment, and so they like randomly terminate some services or will do some stuff, and then you test how your application reacts to these chaotic changes. So what's your stance on that? Do you use that?
I will disappoint you because I never tried this. Yeah, I know about chaos engineering and then this approach, but I never tried to do any kind of chaos testing.
Hmm.
Funny thing, it's just a joke, but I never try it because I have this every day. 500 in the services down and everything, so I don't need a tool for that. So it's a normal thing that happens every day.
Yeah, but shouldn't we test these scenarios in the well during the testing period? So, like for instance, a typical situation, right? So there are two again services A and B, and they are connected, and the service A sends some data. That's a huge amount of data and takes several minutes. And then in the middle of this process, something happens with the network and it shuts down. So, and do we test how the situation goes then with service
we
B?
should we should test all the resilience of the all the microservices and like actually like changing everything that should be expected. Like you said, okay, I send in the data, but at the middle of this process, I just stop it, or I'm sending an event and then the event's gone away, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
sending an event and out of the blue it has the same ID as the previous event or has this exactly the same data it shouldn't.
Yeah.
This fits in the chaos engineering, and for sure it should be tested for sure. But like in this way, it's from my take, it's more really controlled environment where we know that we are doing those all those difference. We are knowing that you are changing all this stuff, expecting that your application will behave correctly
Mm-hmm.
instead of like I had this actually this week, no, this week or past week in our at my at work. Uh, we do have an integration service from external entity
Uh-huh.
where I work for a fintech. So everything like we have accounts, we call it
Mm-hmm.
arrangements. So we fetched accounts from the integration service from elsewhere. And we do have a real integration environment with this real integration. And one of the tests we did, we sent an incorrect account. And
Okay.
the application integration service was returning instead of like 404, 500. And then our application interpreted it as a 500 and just stopped it.
Wow.
And this is a huge issue, actually, right? In
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think this fits in the chaos engineering because, yeah, I'm sending something that doesn't exist or not expected or like changing it. And I just expected that my application will behave correctly. Even though it's a 500 in the other service, I should handle this in a better way instead of just stopping my application and throwing an
Exactly.
exception that halt my
Exactly.
application, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That seems fair enough. And that also corresponds to what you've been saying before, that we should test all the possible user interactions with the application, right? Because, well, users can be sometimes unpredictable and
Yeah, and funny enough, we do have the unit tests and the mock test for this, of course. But within the real integration is a different story, right? That's
hmm.
why it's really important as well to test with the real dependencies if we can, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, so how many tests are usually there for a typical enterprise microservice? Well, more or less. Like I know they're
Ooh.
different. What's the
Uh,
maximum amount that you have seen in your life?
maximum,
Yeah.
Jesus. Uh, for the payment system, we do have. It's one microservice. It's only the payment microservice. There's a lot of microservice for payments. The main payment microservice we do have has more than 1,000 tests.
1,000 tests. Oh
Yeah.
my God. So,
If I'm not mistaken, it's almost 2,000 tests.
and how long does it actually take for the application to go through all these tests before it runs?
Forever. No, no, not forever. But yeah, we are doing some improvements. But like those are only integration tests. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
to you. So all
Mm-hmm.
those integration tests takes now we run in parallel a few things, but it takes like 30 to 40 minutes.
Wow.
Because think that I'm like actually opening the context of a
Yeah.
microservice
Yeah.
and then hitting a real endpoint. And then it
Yeah.
takes it's a lot of tests, a lot of processing, a lot of things, a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, and it's one of the, and you can imagine like, okay, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, it's a long time. It shouldn't be in this way. I do agree as well, but at least if we find an issue, it's only 40 minutes. It's not like a full day of like try to debugging and try to find the solution, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like there are some trade-offs. It's not ideal if you have like super long pipeline, but
Mhm.
still fine.
Right. So if after 40 minutes there's one test that failed, then the process
Uh,
begins again, right? After fixing the wow.
mhm, mhm, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Well, that's a lot of coffee. I mean,
yeah, it's a lot of
taking
free.
to
We do have the pipeline, so we just like okay, send to the pipeline. We can have a coffee. We can browse Instagram. We can read an article. We can do all this stuff. Then we can get the feedback from the pipeline.
yeah, I see. So maybe you could show us, if you have it on your hands, the code for the Quarkus application for the API test, so that we could compare.
The which application? Which example?
Yeah, so we look now at the Spring Boot based application, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
you have the Quarkus based app with API test?
No, formally I don't have, but maybe uh, just to make sure like that we have a comparison.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I used even the Quarkus guide for it because all my applications that I do for talks is based on Spring Boot because most of the developers that they are doing Spring
Yeah.
Boot. But I should get one and just change it to Quarkus. Uh, Let me show this. So
Uh-huh.
let me get again my credit API. One sec. Credit API.
Mhm.
And then share. Da-da-da, da-da-da. Let
Okay.
me go to easy, a different test. So restrictions. So you guys can see that like I don't have any Spring context and anything. This is a integration test directly to the endpoint that is living somewhere. So you guys can see that it's just a test, right? And I'm using like this is the rest assured like style of coding. It has the three keywords given when then, given is a precondition, when is the action, then is the expected result. So given, I send a path parameter to this CPF and there's some data. When this simulation is better because we can see the endpoint. So given I have a query parameter name with the non-existing name. When I do get for simulations, then the stats code is not found.
Mm-hmm.
This is pure rest assured. But if I look at Quarkus integration test, you guys will see the same thing.
Yeah. Well, we see the white screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me
Uh-huh.
this part, like in the Quarkus example, actually, given I have it's almost the same, a path parameter name, and this name is like a random string.
Mm-hmm.
When I get this endpoint, hello, greeting name, which is based on this name, which is the random UUID, then starts code is 200 and the body is hello plus, it's actually exactly the same thing. That's why they're using rest assured as well behind the scenes.
Uh-huh.
And what they do this, they of course they have an annotation called Quarkus test, which is more or less the same as Spring Boot test, which will open the context for Quarkus and have the endpoint up and running with your database or any kind of resource you need to open to run the test.
Mm-hmm.
So Quarkus is basically like if you look at Quarkus tests and Rest Assured test, same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so do you use Quarkus more in your work than Spring Boot
No,
or
we use more Spring Boot.
Spring Boot?
We
All
have
right.
few teams using Quarkus.
Mm-hmm.
It started as an experiment and it went really well, and they're
Mm-hmm.
using it still. But there is this evaluation. Like for example, if we change the one of the most critical microservices, which is payment, it will take like some weeks to migrate to Quarkus, and there are still trade-offs for that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why currently most of the microservices we do have are still in Spring Boot, and because at least they started the full development with Spring Boot. But like I would love to move or migrate like a lot of services, microservices to Quarkus because it's like a really nice tool as well. Both tools are nice. So, but yeah, we have our choice.
Yeah. Well, I know there is also Micronaut. It's kind of popular. Have you ever worked with that?
Yeah, I never worked with Micronaut, but the guys really like Micronaut. And when you go to some conferences, that they are there, and the talks are super nice. They can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So I have another question. So, friends, don't hesitate to ask your questions as well. Right? So, anything you wanted to ask about testing, feel free. My question is um, do API tests also serve as or can they also serve as a performance benchmark? So, for instance, we hit an endpoint and we measure how long it took to get the response, or is
We
it a
can.
completely different story?
Yeah, we can. Rest Assured has this ability to do so, but I wouldn't recommend that much. I would recommend real performance testing tools, K6, even JMeter with a user interface, because they are better tools to monitor everything that is like performance related, and you get better results. If you just want to, okay, uh, create some threshold, even in your code, instead of doing performance tests, but just in normal threshold. Any request should be done in, I don't know, 3 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
It won't hurt if you add this assertion in your test. But at some point, let's say if I'm using a MacBook M4, then maybe it's returning in less than 3 milliseconds. If I get a really old machine, maybe a Windows One old one, it will get more time because I'm depending on the resource of my machine,
Yeah.
maybe. So it's from my perspective, it's better to do more in the performance testing perspective than like doing the code that we are writing.
Mm-hmm. All right. What is your go-to performance tool?
Uh, K6, it's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know K6 is good. Gatling, for me, it's the best one because
Mm-hmm.
it's Scala, JVM based. It's for Java developers. It's easier to understand, extend, and do all this stuff. But K6 is being really popular nowadays as well.
Yeah.
But my goal, my first one will be Gatling for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
I see. I see. Elias, do you have any recommendations or tips or like maybe best practices for uh, those of our audience who want to start writing better API tests or who want to actually write more quality code?
Cool. Yeah, for sure. The first thing, I know that all of you are doing this, but it's worth to mention that like if you're using Spring Boot with Spring Boot Test or Quarkus with Rest Assured, read the full documentation first, because there are a lot of things that you face in terms of challenge or issues that is already there, written there. Simple things that will be there. For example, uh, that's a super common thing. If you're using at the beginning Quarkus, which you use rest assured behind the scenes, or if you're using rest assured, they have a built-in function. Call it Jesus Christ. Let me just. Sometimes in the tip of our tongue, but you
Yeah.
cannot. Rest assured docs gets user's guide. Where is it? I'm actually looking at the docs just to say the correct word for it. Okay, it's the serialization and deserialization that we do with all the tools, but like where we do with common tools. But if you in the request using rest assured, you can send the object. And
Mm-hmm.
if the object, if all the attributes of that object match with the payload or response body, then rest assurance will do this match automatically. We don't need to do this for rest
Mm-hmm.
assurance, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But you will only know this if you read the doc. And I
Yeah.
see some people using like concatenating, doing all this stuff. Hey guys, you can just send the object. You just need to make sure the object matches with all the attributes from the either request or response. Then it's the first thing. First thing first, it's
Documentation.
documentation and read the documentation and learn a little bit about the tool. Second one, I would say three of three. Second one is like learn a little bit more about testing techniques because we
Which
do
are?
have different ways of testing. For example, I give an example of a boundary analysis
Mm-hmm.
where we are doing some checks. We should check the value we want to see that it's passing, -1 and +1, just to check the conditions we do, like if else or things like this. We do have partitioning. We do have mutation tests, which is another one. We have combinatorial analysis. Sometimes I just forgot the names in combinatorial analysis. Yeah, combinatorial analysis is a mathematical thing where we can, if we have a lot of inputs and based on 2 or 3 inputs, we have a result. We can have this combinatorial analysis to just, okay, what should be my coverage in terms of those 3 different data? And then you can have, okay, you should cover, I don't know, 5 different ways instead of 100 different ways or something like this. There's a lot of different techniques you can use. And of course, like in terms of testing, we call it, we have like white box testing, black box testing. Black box testing is when you don't see the application. White box testing, when you have access to the code. And inside those 2 main boxes, we have a lot of different techniques and approaches for that. And it's basically a full, another word. If I may do, if I can, I would recommend a book for that,
Mm-hmm.
which is from a fellow Brazilian friend. Let me put in the screen. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's from a guy called Mauricio Nish, and he one of the smartest developers I know, and he has a PhD specifically for quality and software testing. And he has this book, Effective Software Testing, a Developer's Guide. And there's a lots of plenty of good examples. If you read this book, you'll be super well covered.
Cool.
And maybe I will send this to you. You can send there. So it's this book is a must if you want to learn more about testing. And there's a lot of things like everything, how you can do effective testing, design contracts, testability, property-based testing, which is a technique, specification-based testing, which is a technique, mocks, structural, test-driven development, large tests, code quality. And actually, it's covering a lot of things, but this is like small portion of all the techniques we get. But if we do like what Mauricio is showing this in this book, we are really good covered. And the last thing about testing, we should not sometimes, but all the time we are doing testing, think about the end customer, not the technical tests. So we do a lot of technical tests, right? We see the requirements, we see all the conditions, and we do test, but we should have this customer hat. And okay, how the customer will use the application. Even though it's a microservice testing, it's a like true code, is not through the user interface. We should try to understand, okay, how the customer can use it, or ourselves. We use a lot of websites every day, right? To book a flight tickets, book a hotel, and etc. And we are users, and we sometimes we do mistakes, right? Even
Mm,
though we are like working with IT, we go there. Okay, what's showing this error? Oh, okay, because of I didn't do this, or I I filled in a wrong something. So we need to think about like how the end user will use it to create better tests.
right. Elias, what do you think? Should developers be more concerned about writing tests? Because sometimes I see that, um, well, I see this attitude like, well, let testers do the job. That's not my none of my business. I'm writing code. So.
Uh, for me, it's a must. I'll give you an example where I work. If we are hiring someone, we have a technical assignment, and if they are delivering a technical assignment without testing, we just reject it right away. Because
Mhm.
even a technical assignment, it's an easy one. It should have tests because it's a safety net, as we say.
Yeah.
So it shows that we are the candidate that we focus on quality, and we must focus on quality, and they're worried about like testing things. We don't need to be the best tester knowing everything, but we should just be aware of tests. And for me, like all the developers, regardless if it's backend developers, Java developers, any developer, they should write tests. If it's like few ones or if it's a lot of tests, whatever, we should write tests. If we don't write, in my strong opinion, if you are software engineers, you're not writing tests, we cannot be named software engineers because test quality is inside this discipline.
Exactly. Well, that's a good answer. Um, right. Well, that is like super cool. It's so exciting. The topic is so great and it's so useful. I mean, guys, just go on, explore the Elias's repository, right? Get this book, read this book, and let's write more quality tests. Elias, what is the next event that you are going to be present on so that we could connect with you offline?
Good question. Let me check another. I have a Actually, I don't have any one in the list anymore. My last one was my two latest ones was DevNexus United States in March,
Mm-hmm.
and this month in April in Amsterdam Jug here in Netherlands in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have no coming soon events, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine because I need to enjoy more the summertime here in
Mm-hmm.
Netherlands. Yeah, but for now I don't have any. But normally I'm going to here in Europe. I'm going to the most of the events that are close by, like 2 hours, 3 hours flight from the Netherlands, basically covering the full Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, the jugs that normally we have, DevNexus, DevOps UK, which will be next week.
Mm.
Uh, JCon, which will be soon enough, I think in a month. There's JFall here. There will be JSpring in a few weeks here in the Netherlands. I will be there for sure in DevOps Belgium, even though if I won't have any talk, I will be there because I will learn a lot from others. There is a J Nation in Portugal, J Prime in Bulgaria, Javaland, which is a super nice one that we had past week, this week, this beginning of this month. JFocus, JavaZone. There's a lot of events I go, and sometimes I talk, sometimes I'm just there as learning new things.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of conferences and jobs. I mean, you can spend most of the year like on the road. Kind
Yeah,
of.
in 2022 and 23, I was basically like traveling every month to a different country. So it was nice, but sometimes it's tiring, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Well, I hope I will be at Spring IO. Well, I'm giving a talk there, but I hope. I mean, if I get a visa, that's kind of an
You
important thing.
should be there, right? You have a talk there, you should be there.
Yeah, it should be there for sure. Well, and if I get a visa, so maybe it will be given for like half a year, maybe, and then I could, because that was my dream, to visit Devox Belgium. That's a super exciting event, huge conference, so many developers, so many people, so like so much to learn and to see and to so many to talk to. So I really would love to come to Devox Belgium. So if you do too, then hopefully we'll meet there offline. That would be
Nice.
great.
It will be nice to see you there. I will be there for sure.
Yeah.
For me,
Um,
it's literally 1 hour and a half from where I live, so it's close
um,
by.
that
By
is
train.
so
By
cool.
train. Yeah.
So cool. That is so cool, amazing. So, Elias, maybe you could post some links to your social accounts or networks like LinkedIn, Blue Sky, so that people
Sure.
could find you, connect with you. And
What I can do, I have one thing normally prepared that I share. I will share like again with you. I have a public speaking page where everyone can find all my projects, all my talks, my social networks,
Mhm.
all the videos that I recorded, podcast participations, the open source projects that I'm working, everything you guys can find there.
Cool, so many goodies, guys. You should check it out. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I posted the link. Okay, well, Elias, that was super cool. I've learned a lot, and friends, I hope you you did as well. So that was a very fruitful talk. Thank you for coming to the live stream. It was cool. Hope one day we'll have another one as soon as possible. So that was fun. Take care. Bye, everyone. Bye bye. Until next time.